Hi. And we are very glad to be speaking to you about neobanking, digital lending, and how Zaggle is doing and what Zaggle's vision is. And I thought the best way to start this conversation would be Zigzag's foray into SME banking, new banking. And we would like to know from you what inspired you and the Zaggle team go, that, do, go down this path. What were the motivations and how the journey has been so far, and what's ahead, like international ambitions, national expansion, and all of that. Love to hear it from
Sure. So thank you for this opportunity. Lovely to speak with you. Just to give you a context where we are in the Zaggle journey first before we dip into our overall thoughts. Look, today we are a SaaS fintech company. That's how we describe ourselves, digitizing spends to drive growth and unlock value, right? And we are seeing massive opportunities in India across board with so much happening around GST, around DeMon, around a whole host of tailwinds. Even COVID acted as a tailwind for at least our business, where we're seeing that there's a huge push to digitize. Right? If you look at the FM's budget speech, the one theme or the thread that I think everybody appreciated and saw was the push to digitize, whether it's on the SME side, whether it's on the individual side, whether it's on the government side itself. The government itself is going through a transformation in India at the state and central level where there's digitization happening. Right? So there's a huge push towards digitization, and we think while you want to digitize businesses and ecosystems, who's going to do that? Right? Somebody has to step up and step in and say, look, I'm going to help these businesses digitize. I'm going to help these communities digitize, right? And that's where our role comes in, whether it's Zaggle or our sister concern, Zigzag. We are focused on trying to understand where can we step in and help the country, help the ecosystem, help the communities in this journey of digitization. And that is where I think the opportunity lies. And of course, we see this opportunity just accelerating in the coming years and decades to come.
Great. Thanks a lot for that, Avinash. I mean, it's great to hear, and we keep listening to you and Zaggle about Zaggle in news, and it's always nice to hear about these things. But I would specifically want to know what are some key problems that you face, while launching the product, while speaking to people about the product, offering them the product, and in generally, general acceptance of, digital lending, new banking amongst SMEs. What are some key challenges?
See, if you look at the challenges, I'd look at it from multiple angles, right? Because this is a complex problem with many facets and many nuances. So one, first and foremost, I think, to the credit of the regulator in India, very progressive, very active, and I think what has been done now with the Department for FinTech being separately created is very commendable because that's, I believe, going to help clarify a lot of things and bring a lot of clarity, because the reality is fintechs have become a very important part of the financial system today, right? And giving clarity as to what fintechs can or cannot do and how should they do it is very important because it eliminates, bad actors, and it also eliminates, ambiguity. So that's one big, change that's happened very recently, and I think that's very welcome. Clarity in regulation as to what we can do on digital lending or any of these activities which are related to finance, I would say, that is extremely important for anybody to go ahead and make an investment and say, I'm committed to this space, right? So, for example, neobanking. I really hope that in the coming year or 2 years, RBI comes out with neobanking licenses, right? And the day they do that, you'll be one of the first ones to apply for it, because I think that's really going to help. And I think the 75 digital banking initiatives is great. It's something which would have been lovely to do if we had a neobanking license. We would have been the first ones to jump on it and said, this is fabulous. So I think there is a regulatory angle, and I think the more clarity that comes in, the better it is. The other is the education angle. today, if you look at SMEs, they are fighting battles at multiple fronts. They're fighting battles with the Amazons of the world, competing for their space in some ways, while they collaborate in some ways. But also, some of the SMEs do recognize that an Amazon or a Facebook could potentially even be competition for them, or take away business from them. So they have that threat. They also have the challenges that their systems and processes are not up to date or not capable of meeting the challenges that the millennials are asking them to address, right? So there's a consumer angle challenge that they have, or their customer angle. It could be that they are supplying to another company, and then they have their own challenges with the compliances, whether it's a filing of GST, whether it's advanced tax, and all that. So there are multiple challenges that these SMEs are facing, and the whole biggest ask that they have is make it simple for us, make it easy, make it mobile first, make it vernacular, right? These are things which will really make it much easier for the Bharat to be able to adopt technology than just the fancy, folks that have been, availing of these services, right? And I think the more we are able to make it vernacular, the more we are able to make it mobile first, the more we are able to make it uh, less intimidating, right? You will see adoption go up. Some of the things that I just touch upon, right? For example, TikTok. Why does TikTok appeal to people? TikTok is a very, if you ask me, I'm not a TikTok user, right? And leave aside the Chinese Indian angle, keeping aside that. Why has it appealed? It's appealed because it was not intimidating as a platform. People felt, यहाँ पे कुछ भी चलता है. It's okay. I can do whatever I want. I can dance. I can sing. It was made. Everything was made permissible, right? And then people got onto the platform, got hooked onto the platform, experimented, and some of it was good, some of it was bad, right? Let's leave that aside, I think. But the fact that you got virality and adoption was simply because there was a message that came out saying it's okay, you can be yourself here, right? I think somewhere we need to make that message go out on our technology platforms also to a SMB that look, it's okay to come onto this platform and click here, there, goof around, make some mistakes. The platform's not going to punish you for that. I think right now a lot of the systems are so rigid that people feel that I don't know how it's going to pan out, right? And of course, there's one thing which is a little bit deeper. SMBs are worried about their data. SMBs are worried about their customers and losing their customers. And I think the privacy bill that's under consideration would also help address that. I think that's very pivotal as India grows and as we have, an open economy where we are welcoming various companies from around the world. That we need to strengthen this law, and I think that bill is in the right direction. I haven't gone through the bill, but I have read the gist of it, and I think it's in spirit. It seems to be in the right direction.
Avinash, you spoke about India as a fancy user, and I read a really excellent term, to categorize users like you and me, India's California users.
Yes.
And all the fintechs are, running, and massively funded fintechs. They're saying, I'm only going to go after this top creamy layer. I'm only going to get margin from this business. I don't want to go after the next 100 million. And there are fintechs which are going in the opposite direction. A parallel would be like a Cred and a WhatsApp Pay, completely different directions, different target audiences. What I wanted to ask you is that what do you think in terms of product and platform features in the neo banking space can go after the bottom of the pyramid?
Mm-hmm. See, if you look at the bottom of the pyramid, what are their needs, right? You need to understand what are their needs, and the needs are very simple. If you look at a consumer side, this is somebody who's looking to figure out how can I save some money, right? And how can I increase my income, right? If you were to put it into two buckets, large buckets, how can I increase my income and how can I increase my savings, right? And the increase my savings is part of a larger umbrella which says actually the sentiment behind it is how can I secure my future, secure the future of my family, my parents, etc. Right? That's why the savings is important. So if you're looking at it from those two buckets, the access part of it for financial instruments and financial services is still lacking. While Jandhan has given them access to banking accounts, one of the challenges which people don't possibly fully appreciate is, look, banks, end of the day, are for-profit organizations, right? And if you make a system which is going to be financially very, very difficult to make profits on, right? Uh, Even if there is a regulatory push to open X number of Jandan accounts, etc., you're not going to see the banks actively try to encourage people to use that account. Right? That's the reality of it. However much we use the PSU mechanism or whatever accounts, to khul jayenge. You'll have the accounts open, but you're not going to see the banks try and get that customer to come again and again and use that account. Right? So the reality of it is a lot of those Jandan accounts today are dormant. I think as we go along, we have an opportunity with the mobile penetration, the internet penetration growing so rapidly in India to offer a different sort of an experience to this user, this consumer, where they say that, look, I'm not going to give you this traditional access to a branch, the traditional high cost, methods, but I'm going to make it much easier for you. Today, why does a person in a rural setting or a bottom of the pyramid, why does this person need to go to a branch, right? They don't enjoy going to a branch because, trust me, they don't feel welcome there in many cases, right? The only reason why they're going there is because the interfaces that are offered to them today are so much not built for them, right? It's not, how many of the banking apps really have a good Hindi interface? I mean, let's be honest about it, right? Nahi hai. And I'm just taking Hindi as an example. You take Telugu, Tamil, Malayalam, Kannada, any of the languages, Marathi, Gujarati, the interfaces are very much English driven, right? And that itself is like the first hurdle. The second hurdle, obviously, is the fact that a lot of the terms are very complicated. The language used is very specific to a certain audience. If you're not exposed to those terms, you're left out. So can we just make it much, much more genuinely accessible to them, right? By doing that, you'll actually see a lot of these people not going to the branch at all. Secondly, I think some of the stuff that came in the budget was very encouraging, that, post offices are now going to get used as full-fledged banking, channels. Now, how are we going to be able to do that? Is there a partnership that's going to happen between India Post Bank and the fintechs, or is it only India Post which is going to try to do that? That's a detail that we are yet to hear about. But I think the post offices have a huge potential. And if you look at Japan, Germany, you look at post offices around the world, post offices have converted themselves into service providers globally. Okay, they're no more your traditional post office or the Dakia who will give you the couriers. That's it. They do a lot more. I think that's something which can potentially, in one stroke, increase access to banking 10x, because the number of post offices that we have is a 10x compared to the branch network, right?
Yeah.
So there
Post
are.
office kiranas also. Like, I've seen a lot of startups innovate with kiranas, and I thought that was so excellent, because you keep speaking about, bringing people into the digital net. But a lot of times a person coming to a kirana will come with cash, and the kirana store owner is the one who's the digital interface, which I thought was
Yes.
such a cool idea.
Yes, because I mean, what happens is it's a comfortable environment. The person is familiar with the kirana shop guy, and also it is assisted buying in some way, or assisted transacting, right? So if you're not familiar with the interface, if you don't know what to do, there's somebody that you trust who is helping you make that transaction happen. So absolutely, that's another thing which we are seeing happen. Again, it's helping your small time shopkeeper, right? He or she is also in a lot of need for additional revenue lines, additional footfalls. So this is essentially a win-win. Coming to the point that you mentioned about the California Indians,
Yeah.
I think I saw it in Ken or somewhere. It's a beautiful term. I think the future actually lies in companies which are able to cater beyond that segment. That's my hypothesis or my submission to your audience. If anybody is looking to get involved in the fintech space in India, please think beyond this small target group, because the real potential of the opportunity in India lies in the Bharat. It is not necessarily in this segment. This segment is always there, and hopefully it will continue to grow as we have seen. But you can't, as a company, wait for this segment to grow to become, very, very sizable, like a 600 million type, because that's probably 20 years away. So I think anybody who's really looking at India and looking at doing something interesting in the fintech space should go after the larger. It could be on the consumer side, it could be on the SMB side, MSME side, right? But the opportunity is there in a very big way on both sides.
Yeah. I also wanted to speak about, look, it's great to see these incredible valuations that fintech companies are raising funds on and whatnot. But there is an important point that you brought up about, is it economically viable to offer these products at such low margin, almost negative unit economics, especially payment companies, right? And a lot of payment companies, especially, I'm seeing all roads to monetization lead to lending. Either they want to acquire an NBFC license, become an NBFC, but kisi tarah I want to lend, and that'll give some lifetime value to my high CAC for acquiring the customer for payments in the beginning. Do you think that's do you see money in that strategy?
See, I think it's a risk reward game. When all your bets are hedged on lending, that too to a segment which may not be necessarily something that you understand very well, you don't have too many hooks with that segment, right? And is an untested segment. You are taking a lot of risk. So even if you are able to monetize in the short term, when the credit cycle turns, when the recession hits, you're probably going to get into a lot of losses, NPAs. Right? Personally, I think that's not a great strategy, if you ask me. And as a company which is significantly profitable, one of the few profitable fintechs at scale in India, I think our belief has always been that you need to figure out a way to have a business model which is viable, right? Rather than using hope as a strategy, right? Which is what we see very frequently. So our view has been that don't try to burn cash and get the user. Try and be smart. We've always looked at anchors, whether it's corporates, whether it's SMBs and their employees and their dealers and distributors and retailers as ways of acquiring users and SMEs. And today our CAC is negligible. Actually, in some ways, if you look at it, our CAC is almost negative, right? Because while I earn on my software, when I sell it to a corporate, I acquire the user as well. So there are ways and means of scaling if you're willing to work hard and put in a lot of effort to be able to get those users. Today we have more than 2 million active users. We have probably overall about 5 million users, but I'm talking of the active ones is more than 2 million, and that continues to grow, right? So my thought would be that this strategy of just looking at lending as the only means of revenue of a base that you have acquired through a very high CAC is fraught with risk. And it's definitely not a model which I think RBI is also very encouraging of, because there's increased systemic risk that you create with that eventually. So there has to be a different monetization model. There has to be other ways of making money, whether it's on transactions, whether it's on float, whether it could be ad revenue, whether it could be some other innovative ways of subscriptions that you can offer to them. So that there are a lot more ways of monetizing a base in India. Trust me, we've been able to do that successfully, than just trying to do lending. Lending should be made accessible to people. I think there's a huge opportunity to offer lending, But look, straight off the bat, I'd say there's the insurance market, for example, is probably even bigger than the lending opportunity in India, right? India is significantly underinsured at multiple levels. Why not look at offering that, right?
Yeah.
Why not look at investments? And why look at only financial services as an offering to this user? Why not try and understand this user and say, what else does she need? What else does he need, right? It could be OTT content. It could be a variety of things that you could do potentially on that platform, if you really understand your user and if you're focused on trying to monetize without. See, I think the biggest issue that happens, Aparajita, is that the fintechs get into the what I call the CAC pressure, right? When the CAC is very high, you need to monetize quickly to be able to answer to your investors, right? That is where I think people need to relook at their CACs. I think if you don't have a huge CAC, there's a lot that you can do. When you have a huge CAC, then you try to cut corners.
Yeah. No, I think that's such an interesting point, and you're one of the few fintech entrepreneurs who puts it that way. You know, when you have this incredibly high CAC and you use payments as a business which will acquire lots of data, and I'll use this data at some point in time to cross-sell a lending product or some other product which will become profitable. And to your point, I don't know how possible that will be after the data protection bill comes in. You'll have to keep reacquiring the customer to use her data for different use cases. You can't indefinitely use her data. Now, I wanted to actually speak to you about a sort of very common theme I've heard with neo-banking entrepreneurs, which is consumer trust. So a payments company or a lending company has a very transactional relationship with the customer. It's not a long-term, beautiful sort of trust-based relationship with the customer. It's very one transaction done, I'm out of the app. I don't really care if I'm transacting on Google Pay or PhonePe. But when it comes to deposits, banks still have a monopoly on trust, right? I will, when I want to make a deposit of in my savings account or my current account, I still trust an HDFC or an ICICI. How do you think that a neo bank can kind of partake in building long-term consumer trust?
See, I think there are two ways of doing it, Aparajita. One, which is something which so far RBI has also been more supportive of, which is a fintech or a neobank partners with a traditional bank, right? An SBI, HDFC, and ICICI, where the bank essentially acts as the trust custodian. The money eventually sits with the bank, right? The money doesn't sit with the fintech. The fintech acts as a new age digital entity which is able to engage with the customer in a much better manner, in a much more friendlier manner, with a UX which is much more in line with what the customer has seen or experienced with Amazon and all these new age companies giving a state of the art experience. The fintech is better positioned to be able to replicate that experience. The bank essentially sits at the back end and is the trust custodian. So that's a model which I think is going to become increasingly more popular. I think some of it you already see. Some of the biggest banks in India have been able to do it in-house, like a Yono. And it's been a success story. I don't anticipate a lot of the other banks to be able to do it. SBI was able to do it because SBI is SBI, right? Let's take it.
Yeah.
It's a behemoth. It's at a different league, and maybe one or two of the larger banks like an HDFC, etc., have a chance. But I don't.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, the SBI chair or someone did say we are the largest fintech company. Something like that, with Yono, which is, I guess, fair. They have incredible distribution.
They just are like so deeply entrenched, and the amount of data and knowledge that they have about India and Indian customers and Bharat, and when I say India, I mean both Bharat and India, right? It's just mind-boggling, right? So this is one model. The other model is when RBI is able to go ahead and say, look, I'm going to start issuing neo-banking licenses. Our trust actually, if you look at it, Aparajita, stems not from the bank, but from the fact that RBI is the lender of last resort. The RBI is sitting at the back and saying, look, there's the deposit guarantee, 5 lakh, whatever that is there. I don't know. But there's an entity in India as well, like the US, which guarantees all deposits, right? Again, effectively, I think somehow linked to RBI. So I think as long as there are neobanking licenses and it's very clear that you can go ahead and deposit money with this bank, which is a digital bank, which is again regulated by RBI and which is licensed by RBI and has all the checks and balances that RBI puts onto a traditional bank, and consequently will also be slapped on its wrist if it does something naughty, which is very important. I think once you got that piece established, I don't see a lot of millennials, at least, or people more comfortable with technology, who would hesitate to go and at least start opening some of these accounts and seeing how it goes. Right? They may not keep a lot of money there in the get-go, but look, for example, prepaid cards. Right, we're one of the largest issuers of prepaid cards in India, as per RBI data, and prepaid cards also essentially is a form of deposit. The ticket sizes are typically much lower, right? And historically, we haven't seen consumers or corporates hesitate to take a prepaid card, even if it's issued by a PPI. Most of our programs are all of them are issued in partnership with a bank. So in our case, it's a little more different, and we chose that path for this very reason. But even if it's issued by a PPI, there is less hesitancy when it comes to a prepaid card. People say, fine, I'm okay with a PPI because it's licensed again by RBI.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. The moment I think philosophically you go to the public and say, I'm going to safe keep your money, I'm going to keep your deposit, you will be licensed by the RBI. No two ways. Even if it's a 10,000 rupee PPI, RBI will take a license from me, then only you can distribute this product. But I also want to speak to you a little bit about that relationship between a neobank and the actual bank at the back end. So for instance, a Jupiter is adding the experience layer, is adding the analytics layer, in essence owns the customer, but legally it's still Federal and Access who keeps the deposit. It's the bank that's answerable to the RBI. Do you think that slowly these banks will start becoming commodities, and does that strain the relationship between the tech partner and the banking partner?
See, banks, in some ways, I would hazard to say, are becoming commodities. They've already become. Because, in absence of differentiation, right? And today, what's the differentiation that a bank can provide to a fintech? To be very honest, we work with a variety of banks, and the banks that we work with have been very supportive. But the reason why we're choosy about the banks that we work with, which is just 3-4 banks like IndusInd, NSDL Payments Bank, Yes Bank, RBL Bank, these are banks who, when we speak to them, when we have engaged with them before signing up, have come back and said, look, we are going to support you, significantly more than anybody else in the market, right? So it's almost like it's a given that traditionally banks don't necessarily support a lot. That's the underlying current, but we are different because we're going to support you a lot, right? Now that's the pitch of an SBM or a Federal or any of these banks today, right? And I think as long as that's the underlying reality, that banks are less responsive, you're going to see this happen. Also, I think banks somewhere need to realize that they need to know what they're good at and they need to know what they're not good at, right? It's okay to say that, look, I can do everything, right? And potentially they can, but what all has to, or what are the stars that need to align for you to be able to do everything? You're never going to get that kind of bandwidth as a bank. You're always trying to juggle so many balls and trying to be compliant and trying to answer to the regulator and answer to the ombudsman and answer to, Ministry of Finance. So a bank has a lot on its plate to be able to innovate. It's also by DNA, a bank is a risk averse entity, and that's how it should be. So innovation requires a certain degree of risk taking. So you have a philosophical disconnect there. A bank which is very innovative actually is a recipe for your subprime problem, right? That's what happened in 2006 or 5. You had banks who said, I'm going to become very innovative, and all the stuff that happened, at least in the US, really happened because of that securitization and that quote unquote innovation, which came across later as what it was, right? So you don't want your banks to really think or create a culture where they say, I'm going to do innovation at the risk at the expense of my risk management capability, right? So consequently, it's only the service and the level of collaboration that a bank can offer which makes a bank attractive to a fintech today. Their tech stacks, to be very honest, across board are really, really primitive, old school. And that's going to be a problem across board for these banks, because changing some of these systems, like we've seen some of the largest banks in India go through hell because of what happened on their outages. And RBI stepped in and did slap their wrist. So that's something which is a reality. It's just the scale that this particular bank had reached. So that's why they had more issues. It's not that systems are worse off than anybody else. It's just that they scaled so much that the system started to creak. And I think that's going to be an ongoing problem for banks, because their underlying tech architecture and tech stack really, really is archaic.
Yeah. And I feel like even if banks are becoming back-end commodities, right? Even if Axis and Federal at the back end of Jupiter doesn't really have that relationship with the customer, at the end of the day, the fintech partner or the neo-banking partner is just giving the bank distribution, right? They're just increasing their customer onboarding, introducing the bank's products to a new audience.
Yes and no. So it is increasing the distribution, but it's also, if you look at it from an emotional perspective, right? Who owns the customer? You hit the nail on the head. To the customer, until they believe that they're a Federal or an Axis Bank customer, it's great for Federal or Axis. The day the customer starts to think I'm a Jupiter customer, that's when the customer can be moved from Federal to Axis to a third bank, or the Jupiter or whichever new bank. When Zaggle, when we get our license, potentially we could turn around and say, look, I have my license today, and you are my customer, and I'm as regulated and as compliant. In fact, I don't have the legacy tech issues. I don't have the legacy of all these fines that have been levied by all these levied on all these other banks. So Aparajita, I can commit to you that we are going to run our neobank in a very different way, so that we don't get fined by RBI. Right? That could be a pitch that I can make to you, that look, I'm like a political party, right? I'm a new political party. I'm starting afresh. I don't have the baggage of all the bad stuff that the others have done, right? So it's the same pitch that you're making, emotional pitch, and that's a very powerful pitch. People want something better in their lives. India is an aspirational country, very confident, and we believe we deserve better, which we do. So we will want to try something, as long as we know that it's backed by a RBI type of an entity, right? There's a regulator in the back end who is acting as the gatekeeper to ensure that we don't get swindled, to put it in a direct way, right? So as long as that is there, I think Federal and Axis are obviously cognizant of this fact that Jupiter or any new bank could potentially take a license tomorrow and could make a pitch to these customers and say, look, I have a license, why don't you directly work with me?
Yeah. Actually, I want to speak about this license, and obviously the regulator is toying with the idea of a digital bank license or a neo bank license. And for RBI, more than a decade ago, they took a flyer with PPI. Okay, some guy sitting in Bangalore who coded a e-wallet app can someday take a license and take up to 10,000 rupees of deposits from customers. But right now, the way the fintech ecosystem is built is that a fintech company is still one step removed from the regulator. In between, the bank will always sit and take that shock from the regulator. If a fintech company, if a neo bank takes that license from the RBI, do you think that that agility that you spoke of, it'll lose some of that ability to take risk, to offer new products, to close down a product, all of that kind of that secret sauce associated with the fintech?
See, again, great question, and that's partly true. But if you dig deeper and understand why banks struggle to comply with what RBI is asking, and I'm going to say something controversial here. The reality of it is in India, the customer and the regulator are two steps ahead of the banks. The regulator is also very progressive. The customers are very hungry for newer stuff. Banks, possibly a lot of banks want to offer that, but what's dragging them back is their legacy tech. They have 600 platforms talking to each other through archaic flat files, and mainframes. And trust me, I know this because my first 7 years in my career, in my past life, I was a quote unquote banking software consultant working with banks, both in India and around the world. It's the same stuff everywhere. And I have friends who continued in that industry. I have moved on 15 years ago. Uh, when I talk to them offline, they say it's the same. More things change, the more things remain the same. It's the same platform issues, it's the same integrations. Systems are not built for APIs, built on APIs, no microservices architecture, nothing, right? It's your AS400s, your I series, your mainframes, your COBOL that runs ultimately in the background. And until that is your backbone, RBI is going to not wait for you to upgrade your architecture. I mean, how many years is RBI going to wait? 2 years, 1 year? It's decades. So RBI is going to say, I don't care. You want to write it on a notebook or chalk and this thing, you keep your books on that, but you need to do A, B, C, D and furnish this data and make sure that this is working this way, right? Banks are not able to do that. Because they're not able to do that, they keep getting caught with, with issues. Let me put it this way, right? And then they explain it in a flimsy way, and markets really hit them and say, your stock goes down, right? I strongly believe, a good neobank, which is starting with a clean slate, will actually engage with RBI and say, look, we are starting afresh. How do you think we should build our platform? Right? Not that RBI is going to be a consultant, but you can go ahead and engage with RBI and say, this is how we are building it. This is what we are doing. These are the checks and balances. And there are enough people today in India, Prajita. We have a couple of very, very senior people now on our advisory board from SBI, from NPCI, extremely reputed people who have retired, right? Who may not necessarily execute anything for me, but their wisdom and their knowledge is so vast and so deep that it's worth its weight in gold. The few hours that you get to spend with them every fortnight or every month, and you can actually work with these people and build a much better platform, much better system, which allows you to not just comply to RBI today, but what RBI might ask 3 years down the line, 5 years down the line. Right? If your tech stack and architecture is built like that, a lot of it will come out of the system, and you don't have to then open in Excels and fiddle with data and somehow say RBI ka submission hai at 5 o'clock. Somehow I send out something. We've all heard of that. I've seen that myself, right? So I believe it's the tech is the savior for the neobanks, and the fact that they're coming with a clean book, a clean slate, no NPAs which are being managed, no past issues that are being managed. That clean slate is extremely valuable, and good neobanks, wise neobanks, will take advantage of that and possibly grow a little slower, but grow the right way, profitably, not from maybe day zero, but with a path to profitability and a clear business model which is sustainable, and also with adequate investments on risk, compliance, security, and care for privacy, and all that kind of stuff. right? Which is very, very, in the long term, it's your lifeline. It's your one thing that's going to keep your company a going concern when things go south. Or how good are you at these things?
Okay, great. If you had a wish list for the regulator, Avinash, can I bait you into answering? If you could tell the regulator top three things,
Top
what would
three things. I think one would be a license for digital banking or neo banking, whatever that can be called. The second is to make it mandatory for anybody who's collecting KYC. And this is a
Hmm.
pet peeve of mine for years, right?
Hmm.
Why don't we make any financial service to begin with, right? It could be your mutual funds, it could be your. So it requires RBI to work with the insurance regulator, the SEBI, whatever is the mutual fund regulator, all of them. But to begin with, anybody who's doing KYC for any financial product once, right? If she consents that another entity can go ahead and let them go ahead and check her KYC, it should be just a click of a button, right? It should
Hmm.
not require. Why should you and I and all Indians continually keep doing their KYC again and again and again and again and again and again with various different entities? It just is makes no sense. Link it to Aadhaar. Aadhaar is a beautiful platform. I think keeping the debate aside of other things and the politics of it, I think fundamentally now all of us have got Aadhaar, right?
Hmm.
Whether you
Yeah.
like it or not, post the COVID vaccine and all that, we've got our Aadhaar, right? 99%, 95% of people have got their Aadhaar. Link it to their Aadhaar and it is their consent. If I don't want to share my KYC, then I can go ahead and keep getting my KYC done 100 times, right? But if I am willing to share my KYC information to another entity through account aggregator model or something, why are you
Hmm.
not allowing me to just do my KYC once? And then I'm happy to do it annually again and again, but just make me do it once for one entity. Maybe RBI does it themselves or whosoever. Create a separate body which does like an NPCI type body or NPCI itself, which does KYC for all of us, right? But
Yeah.
that shouldn't happen that you're getting your KYC done for credit cards, debit card, this, that, this again and again. So that's my second
Hmm.
ask. The third is why can't we have a KYC which is much simpler rather than the current video KYC, which is basically given but not given, right? It's so complicated. There are so many pitfalls there, right? I think that's the third thing, but I would call it as 2A and 2B. And the third one actually would be if I as an NBFC can go ahead and give an unsecured loan today, why
Hmm.
is no lending entity other than a bank allowed to issue a credit card? The regulation actually, if you read it, and I was reading it for random reasons because I like to read this stuff. Just over the weekend, actually, the regulation allows for NBFC to issue a credit card. That's what RBI says, right? But so far, they haven't even allowed any NBFC to issue a credit card, including a Bajaj FinServ, right? Bajaj
Yeah.
FinServ, I take a name because it's a very scaled up
Yeah.
fintech NBFC, very reputed, has done I believe phenomenally well. So if a Bajaj FinServ doesn't get a credit card issuing license, uh, even the experimentation is not happening, and credit cards are the most profitable products for banks. It's very simply, not a level playing field, right? Banks are having an unfair advantage when it comes to issuance of credit cards, right?
Hmm.
So allow at least some NBFCs, maybe with some limitations, some restrictions, but at least start like they took a bold step, as you rightly said, with PPIs. 10, 15 years ago, they started to allow PPI licenses. Allow for some NBFCs where the regulation already says it's allowed, right? Give a few licenses. It's not going to change the world dramatically because these NBFCs are already giving unsecured loans.
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of debate on card as a form factor, right? And why RBI is so reluctant on card as a form factor. Today, even Avinash, I'm sure you have seen that even non-NBFCs are doing BNPL products. They've structured it with their lawyers in all sorts of fancy manners, but non-NBFCs are lending on their books right now, which is exactly why this beautiful elaborate report by the RBI. But to me as a consumer, a card is a very fractured kind of user experience, right? Today I wanted a credit line. I'll apply for a card, I'll get it 7 days later. I did the KYC, and then I can use the bank has to deliver, has to have feet on street to deliver the card to me. So high in cost to deliver that experience, and such a fractured use case. And BNPL, on the other hand, so close to the point of desire. I wanted to buy an iPhone today. It shows me exactly how much BNPL I can take,
Correct.
and I can take that loan. So I'm just curious to know, like, why in the top three wish list is cards so prominent? Are you still betting on cards as a form factor that Indians will continue to use?
See, absolutely. I think if you look at the way, whether it's the corporate credit card, whether it's the purchase card, any of these products, or on the consumer side. Look, by card I don't mean a physical card. Let me
Mm,
clarify. I mean basically a
mm,
all the features. It could be tokenized. It could very well be in your phone, and you are paying through UPI. There's nothing which stops on UPI. In fact, we are talking to NPCI to on our credit cards to open up UPI for prepaid. We've already done it on credit cards. We're trying to do it, right? So I'm not meaning the physical plastic per se. You could just chuck it for all I know, right? But
mm,
I'm saying the construct of a product, right, is extremely powerful because there are a lot of benefits that you see which a credit card can give, which a BNPL can't. See, BNPL is a is a tricky product if you ask me, and it's fundamentally unregulated. And I think it is there is going to be regulation around it because it's a lending product. However, I mean as they say in the US, if it walks like a pig, it talks like a pig. I
yeah.
think whatever that is, right? It is. It is a lending product. So, and the risk that you have in a BNPL type of product is nobody is really thinking through it's fairly established that people know that if I'm revolving on my credit card, my interest rate is very, very high. It is known to people today, and there is enough education that can be done, right? But on BNPL, nobody really knows what is the standard rate of interest, what is the repayment schedule, there are no guidelines or directives. Like for a credit card, for example, you need to minimum by law give at least more than 15 days. So minimum 16 days from the date of the statement that is sent to the customer. He or she is given that much time to start repaying. Right? There is a very clear RBI directive around this.
Mm,
What's there on BNPL? I can do a BNPL for 8 hours, and you
mm,
may not even realize that it's 8-hour BNPL, right?
mm,
Uh, it's fraught with risk. So I think when you start looking at some of these things which seem too good to be true and super convenient, it's only because they haven't scaled and there is not enough regulation coming in because 360-degree thinking hasn't happened, and so it's super convenient. Convenience and security are always at loggerheads if you look at it. And you need to find the right balance. And if you were to ask me if it's a 51, 49, 49 should be convenience, 51 should be security and privacy. You
mm.
can't compromise on this aspect, especially in a country like India, where you got a very large population and a lot of people may not be as tech savvy, etc. Right? So you always try to build regulation for the small guy, right?
Yeah.
You don't try to build regulation for the big and mighty. Net, I would say that these are going to get regulated. These will not be as too good to be true type of experiences. And if you look at the credit card, it's a very stable product. It's time tested. It has gone through the entire cycle multiple times, the credit cycle, the recessions, right? I mean, look, when wallets came in 6-7 years ago, 2014, 15, and we were one of the few fintechs which didn't do a wallet because for the precise reason that I mentioned previously, we didn't see a business model beyond, what was the very, very obvious, and we could see it get disrupted. Right? We didn't obviously predict UPI, but we thought banks would start doing it. And what's the big deal about it, right? Making a mobile app is no great shakes. Everybody seems to have a mobile app. That's what a wallet essentially seemed to us at that time, and that hypothesis got validated. So the same way, I think if you look at any of these things, this whole thought that cards are going to just cards isn't not the plastic. The plastic may very well go away, right? But that product construct is going to go away. I think is a big fallacy. And if you look at the funding also recently that you see in the market, whether it's a Slice, whether it's a Unicard, whether it's a whole host of guys who are getting funded. And if you look at the US, where a lot of the card companies have moved away from a lot of the spend management companies have moved away from even their SaaS revenues, like a Brex, like a Ramp, right? A whole host. Expensify just went IPO and just said, I'm not going to charge you for software, right? I'm going to make money on the card, right? The transactional, the interchange income, and other income that you can make. So that's the Pleo is doing that. It's a Danish company, very, very strong in Europe, deep presence in the UK. Pleo is doing more or less that, right? So you're seeing this happen. Spenmo in Singapore is trying to do something like this. So you're seeing a lot of players bet on the card, and that's again a lot of infrastructure, a lot of education has gone in there. And one last point on this card thing, a lot of people miss this point. 2014, August 15th, Prime Minister from the Red Fort said, I'm opening Jan-Dhan accounts. Everybody is going to get a debit card, right? In partnership with banks. If he had said, I'm going to do something for financial inclusion, and admittedly, the infrastructure was not there then, so I'm not blaming the Prime Minister. But at that moment, if it was said that it's going to be mobile-led, led by India Post in partnership with fintechs, right? And it's not going to be a savings account and a debit card, right? Possibly it could have been different. We could have possibly gone maybe the way China did, right? Where everything is wallets and less of cards. But look, 750 million upwards of Indians got introduced to financial inclusion or banking when a bank rep went and told them, ये लीजिए आपका कार्ड, इसको ऐसा ATM में डालते हैं और इससे पैसा निकलेगा. उनके दिमाग में this is what banking is. Their card is their bank, right? Gone are those days where people are carrying their passbook, right? Even if they have their passbook, मुझे पैसा कहाँ से मिलेगा? मुझे तो कार्ड से पैसा मिलता है, right? Card has now got trust. I know how to use my card, and I know that there is a PIN, and I even know that there is something called an OTP that is coming, right? And I shouldn't share it with anybody, right? So there is so much of money that has gone into educating the masses. Now we want to, say, no, it's changed. People are not going to take it. I mean, it's who's going to make that investment?
Right? Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. So that familiarity with the form factor also, with Jan-Dhan brought in.
Comfort, familiarity, trust, and it was a PSU banker most probably who came in, who quote unquote is sarkari and hence, not working for profit and hence not going to run away with my money. And because of that, I believe in that person more than maybe a private player. I'm talking of Bharat here, right? And when he or she came and gave me this card, right? And by the way, this is the same person who, is doing some work around elections and this and that, a lot of community work, right? So I know this person, he's part of my community or she's part of my community, and she gave me this card and it is working as it was told. A lot of the direct benefits transfers are coming to me. A lot of the insurances are coming to me. I'm able to go to the ATM and withdraw cash on this, right? So this is my instrument. Now I'm not going to want to change to something new, which I don't know who's going to bring it to me and why should I go through the hassle?
Yeah, super interesting. Okay, last question, Avinash. I'm just going to, bait you into a little bit of crystal ball gazing. Next 5 years, where do you see some consolidation happening? what are you short on? Like I can understand you're certainly short on wallets. You've been short on wallets. And what are you long on? Where do you feel like you see more consumer adoption, investor interest also?
See, I think we strongly see Aparajita, spend management and digitizing and aggregating spends. Okay, is going to be extraordinarily powerful. It's going to explode in India. It's happening already globally. Because look at all the tailwinds, right? Whether it's Demon, whether it's GST, whether it's COVID being the biggest CTO, blah blah blah. That's very true, actually. It's not blah blah blah, right? And digitization has become inevitable. As I mentioned in the budget, the one theme was digitization, right? And everybody applauded, or at least didn't criticize the FM for that, because they know that it's like vaccines. I think one of the success stories of India, why India has already and will cope much better with COVID than other countries in the long term, is because no community has stood up and said vaccines are bad. Everybody has been clamoring, saying my village is not getting enough vaccines, right? Whereas in the US and Europe, you see communities after communities standing up. You have anti-vaxxers and all that stuff going on, right? And here is a country which is not half as prosperous as some of those countries, but we are probably much wiser as a people. And same is the thing with digitization. Nobody is criticizing the government for pushing for digitization, right? So there is a lot of genuine unsaid belief that digitization is going to change the face of India. Maybe people don't even know it because they don't explicitly say it, but it is subconscious, right? It has become so deeply rooted in us as a people that we know that this is our way forward, and that is going to be extremely, powerful as we move along. So spend management, digitizing, anybody who's able to help, SMEs manage their spends, manage their expenses, manage their accounts payable, manage their accounts receivable, get better at competing with the large brands, will really, really see great days ahead. I also strongly believe that RBI is going to come out with digital banking or neo banking type of licenses. That is going to create a lot of innovation, a lot of disruption. Knowing RBI, I anticipate them to do it in a manner which always puts the customer or the consumer's interests first. So I don't see that it's going to be a regulation which is going to cause negative disruption in the ecosystem. It's just going to put more pressure on banks. Absolutely, it's going to force them to become better. It's going to force them to even do more collaborations with fintechs. But I think it's inevitable. And I anticipate even some of the better banks, larger banks, to try and build their own new bank. Like I think, SBI has done, and I think even Kotak is trying to do with 811, and so these things will only get accelerated. You see JPM doing it in the US, a bunch of other banks in the US trying to do it, right? So I think this is going to be a trend which is going to become big. And third trend I would say is around credit cards. And I can come back to that statement. If you just look at the recent data, we are crossing 1 trillion in spends in rupees, not dollars, but 1 lakh crores, right? So that's a lot of, we applaud 1 lakh 40 crore, 1.4 lakh crore GST collections, right? It's great. But look, we're spending almost the same amount on credit cards as a nation. It's mind-boggling, right? So it's a lot, and that is going up. I anticipate that to go up in the coming years. So these are the three: spend management, neo-banking, and credit cards.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Actually, this is the first time I'm hearing COVID as the nation's CTO. I have not heard this before. We're definitely going to quote you on that one, Avinash. That was super cool. Avinash, thank you so much. We've taken 1 full hour on a Friday evening. Very grateful that you took the time. I loved speaking to you.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. Ikigai team has been wonderful, and wish you all the best, and wish all your listeners and viewers the very best. Stay safe. Take care. Bye bye.
Thank you so much. Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, Avinash. Bye.